Now how cute is that? I have quite the treat for you here today, folks. I can tell you right off the bat, some of you are going to love it, some of you are going to hate it. I figure it's probably gonna be more the latter. And yes, I did shave every few decades. I get the wild hair to trim my face, and it's always a mistake, so don't give me any shit. But I hope you will forgive me because look at what I have here for you. This is the Chuzhao, or Chuzhao mini TLR digital camera. Yeah, a little bit of a gimmick, but I love the thing, and I'm gonna tell you why. If you are familiar with Rolleiflex type cameras, TLR, that is twin lens reflex. Twin lenses, one of them is the viewing lens, the other one is the taking lens. So think of this as an SLR, but you have two lenses, so that way you don't lose sight of what you're viewing through the viewfinder. This is a copy of a Rolleiflex, hard to say the actual model, but more to the point, you may or may not know this, I think this is more of a copy, Rollei, actual Rollei, the company that made the Rolleiflex cameras, released some years ago their own little mini Rolleiflex camera. I think that one was a 5 megapixel. This one is a 12 megapixel, and we'll talk more about the specs here in just a second. But it is a beautifully executed little copy of a TLR camera, and it literally fits right there in the palm of your hand. I'm telling you, it's the cutest thing in the world. And overall, folks, I was surprised at how well made it is. Yes, it is plastic generally overall. I think there may be a few metal parts in there, especially on the strap lugs there, but it is generally plastic, but it is very well executed. You have chromed plastic around the two little twin lenses here. You have some chrome accents, chrome on the little name there. Overall, it is very nice. Of course, you have that little plastic pop-up waist level viewfinder. I'll show you more about that here in just a minute when we walk around the camera. But first, I want to tell you what you're going to be getting in the box with this camera and go over a few specs. This is a review after all. Along with the camera itself, you're going to get a little Chuzhao camera strap. It seems like it's nylon, maybe ballistic nylon. The little quick release lugs, you thread those through the lugs on the camera and you can snap the strap on and off without having to take the entire strap off the camera itself. And yeah, I actually like using the camera with the strap. Gives that great waist level viewfinder experience. Some folks just like throwing it in their pocket or throwing it in their pack, their purse, etc. I like just having it around my neck. It weighs next to nothing. Also, in this very handsome box, by the way, in the box, they give you a little micro SD card. Goes right in the bottom of the camera there. That is a 16 gigabyte micro SD. It has a rechargeable USB-C port battery. You can use that to also offload pictures onto your computer if you don't have a card adapter, which this does not come with. It just comes with the card. And you have a little USB-C charging cable. Any standard USB-C charging cable that you use for your cell phone will work for this as well. I'm going to give you a few technical specs here, folks. I'm not going to give you all of them. You can find them on the Chuzhao website or on Amazon. I'm essentially just going to tell you what it says on the box, and then we're going to take a walk around this camera to show you how the buttons work. And I've actually figured something out that I've not seen anybody else talk about when it comes to the autofocus of this camera. The overall resolution, 12 megapixels. This little guy has a little tiny 1/4 inch CMOS image sensor in there. Think of possibly your cell phone image sensor, that kind of thing. So 12 megapixels overall resolution. The exposure compensation is auto. That means that you can't manually change your exposure on this. That's probably getting into the weeds a little bit with a camera like this anyway. So you are essentially relying on the meter inside the camera to meter your scene overall. White balance is of course also auto. You have only JPEG. You'll not be shooting RAW with this. Your little LCD screen, little tiny guy. It's 240 by 240 resolution. I would say that's maybe 1.25 inches or so, roughly square. And speaking of that, this is a 1:1 format camera. This shoots square, just like the well, most of the Rolleiflex's TLR cameras, they were shooting the 6 by 6 centimeter square format. So you'll have a little miniaturized version of that with this one. And the size, folks, I keep going on about how tiny this thing is because it is tiny. This whole thing is about 42.5 millimeters across. It's essentially square, 42.5 millimeters across by about 90 millimeters tall. That is itty bitty. I can't get over it. And it weighs 115 grams. Alexa, what's 115 grams in ounces?
115 grams is about 4.06 ounces.
That's a little over 4 ounces. It's air. So what I'm sure you're curious about is the function of this little camera, and you're in luck because we're going to talk about all of it. Now, to turn the camera on, you have a little on switch here at the bottom left of the camera. Long press that, and the screen illuminates, gives the logo, and in maybe 3 or 4 seconds you are literally ready to shoot. And to do that, you have a little shutter button here on the bottom right hand corner. You single press that, and you can hear the little shutter sound, and that takes the photo. Now, in addition, folks, to the 12 megapixel still photos, this thing also takes 1080 HD video. It's wild to me. So it takes 1080 HD video with sound. There's a few quirks to how that works, and we're going to talk about the actual video here in just a second. Now, moving around the camera, you have the modes. This will shoot color and black and white. You just press the on switch again, and that will switch you to black and white, and it's more of a sepia toned black and white. It gives I suppose people call it nowadays that retro type feel. It's a very warm black and white. I like it. You can tweak it some in post-processing, but not that much. Again, there's not a lot of information in these files. They're only JPEG, they're not RAW, so you can edit that. I have edited these, and they can be quite impressive, and we'll show those at the very end. You have a full-time autofocus on this camera, or you can select it with this little button here at the middle left between the two lenses to not be full-time autofocus. That is, when you move the camera around, it's going to be trying to grab focus onto everything that it senses. If you turn that off, it lets you probably save some battery, but you can do some selective focusing, something that hasn't been talked about, at least not in some of the reviews I've watched, with the little crank here. Now, the crank, it's a multifunction little apparatus. It does not advance the camera. This camera does not cock. There's no mechanical shutter in there. It's electric. But the crank itself is how you go through the menu when you're trying to delete a photo, when you're in the review mode, which is this button right here. You press that to look at your pictures or your video. You can use that to scroll through your pictures. You hit the on button to select them for deletion, and then you can select yes or no with the little crank. Now, something very weird about this, it will take, if you are in the shooting mode, you take the crank and you turn it a few clicks, it will automatically start, I think, an 8-second video clip. Very strange. Now, if you want to take video, just ever how long the card will allow you to take, the shutter button here, if you long press that, that's going to let you take a video of an indeterminate length. But what's sort of hidden, and what nobody ever really talks about, is that if you have your camera not in auto focus, if you turn that off, the lever itself, the little crank, that is also a button. That's your focus button. So if you have it not in autofocus, if you have it in autofocus mode and you want to focus on something right then, change your focus up, have a little bit more control over your focus, just press in that little lever and that will focus. Very nifty indeed. Leia. Now, talking about focusing, folks, you know, this is a little replica of a TLR camera. Unfortunately, it is not a true TLR. That is, this little guy up here, he is just for decoration only. So whenever you take a picture, it will blink just a second. This is your actual take lens, little tiny guy. And you can tell in terms of aesthetics, even though I love this little camera, this was made overseas, obviously, and it has some strange little writings around the lenses. You may find that kind of corny. The same thing with the lens strap. It says the first camera for young people. Even around the lenses, it says inspiration at your fingertips, create the essence, capture the essence of every moment. I don't know, like I said, it's very if you're not used to that kind of thing here in the States or in the Western part of the world, that can be a little cheesy, but some folks choose to do it that way, and I suppose it does carry a little bit of charm. But other than that, like I said, I just love how this looks. I love how this feels. I love the simplicity of this. If you're a big fan of the old film box cameras, folks, that don't have really any shutter or aperture selections or hardly any to speak of, this will really appeal to you. I hate the phrase, I think it's very cliche, of saying it slows you down or it simplifies you, but I suppose in a way it does. You don't have to really worry about a lot of settings. You don't have a lot of resolution, of course. This is not something that you maybe want to put in a gallery, the pictures from it, that is. However, I have got some surprisingly good results, at least I think so anyway, both in color and black and white. So what we're going to do is just show you the sample of the video, let you hear the atrocious sound that this thing has, and then I'm going to show you some of these sample images, just run through them and really let them speak for themselves. And then after that, we'll come back, get some final thoughts on this, who the hell would want to use a camera like this, and why, perhaps, and then tell you where you can get it, talk about the price, all that good stuff. Okay, if you can hear me over Leia snoring over here on the couch, we're going to take a look at some of the sample images from the little Chuzhao mini TLR camera. Now, some of these pictures are going to be processed, some of them are going to be straight out of camera. Actually, most of them are going to be straight out of camera, but I'm going to show you the ones that are processed and show you the essentially before or after. And that's what we're starting with here. This is a processed picture. It's a reflection of yours truly in a window here across the street. Thought it looked like flames, but that's neither here nor there. So you can see here at the right, these are the edits that I've done to that worst here in Lightroom Classic, and I reset. That shows you the original one. Now this is the out of camera black and white, that sepia toned black and white I was telling you about. To me, the contrast is a little soft generally across the board, but however, that does work pretty well with some things. I'm going to show you an example of that here in just a second. So this is the original, and that's the edit. For the file size of these, they actually edit pretty well. I mean, you can't recover shadows and highlights to an extreme amount, but you do have more latitude than you might think in terms of your editing to recover some of the details in your pictures. So moving right along, this is another straight out of camera. That was a straight out of camera black and white. Again, I would prefer it with a little more contrast. These are rather warm. Again, it's a very sepia type tone. So if you want to bring that back to a more true black and white, you can either turn down the temperature or, of course, always just hit your black and white button there. So again, it depends on the scene, depends on the subject. That warm sepia black and white tends to work pretty decently in some things. This is another straight out of camera. I think possibly that was an edited picture. Yeah, I just added some contrast to it. That's one where I think that works pretty well, that warmer sepia tone. It's our first color picture. Colors on this, very interesting. Lots of deep saturations in the reds and especially the blues. It reminds me, dare I say, of maybe Provia or Velvia, especially if you're familiar with Fujifilm or even the Fujifilm recipes on, let's say, their X-Pro cameras. That is straight out of camera color. Sharpness, honestly, very good on this. Again, it looks kind of like an earlier cell phone photo, if that makes any sense to you. But like I said, the sharpness and everything like that is actually pretty good. That was at 100%. That's fit, and then we can go into, let's go to 300%. And you can start to see some of the pixelizations. Again, this is what, a 12 megapixel camera. So that's to be expected, but really, it's not bad, all things considered. All right, now this picture was originally, believe it or not, a color picture. So there's the original version, the color version straight out of camera. And there is our edited black and white. I think I just converted it to black and white and added some contrast, actually. And you can see, get back to it here, you can see what I mean about very saturated blues over here on the pavement, the sky, and the shadows areas here. Very blue. The greens, not so much. But then you have the generally saturated reds of the bark of this tree here. This is one where I feel perhaps there was something that was similar. I think this is my favorite out of this one. There's some I feel that softness works pretty well in, especially the warm tone softness here. You get some glow on that bark, the late afternoon sun. Shadow here, I think this is another process picture. Yeah, there's the straight out of camera black and white. Zoom in here. And then let's go back to the edit. Like I said, just added some contrast in there. I think overall, at least for my taste, I wish this was a little bit higher contrast. But then again, that lower contrast out of camera JPEG gives you more room to tweak in your post-processing. Very similar picture here. One is color, of course. Let me reset this one. That's the black and white. That's the color. Same scene, little street light. And then I had these edits applied here. Yeah, I think I like it pretty well. These two, again, similar pictures. One color, one black and white, straight out of camera. I'm going to zoom in on the color one, so you can see a little bit of the highlight recovery here. It's not much. Once it's gone, but you do have a little bit of wiggle room there to bring some of those highlights back should it overexpose. Now that brings me into something talking about the exposure meter on this camera. I'm not exactly sure. I think it's essentially a point focus, a point focus and a point metering system. Now, I think it's center weighted. You can kind of sort of fool it, but it does automatically meter and adjust your exposure based on that. So you don't have a lot of in-camera exposure control really at all. The colors, again, you can see this really red. It's very punchy with the reds and the blues, but I actually like that. Again, it has that velvety, if I can say that, the very Velvia-esque tones to it, to me, at least in the reds. And depending on the scene, you can get some high contrast in there as opposed to the black and white. I think the color processing on this adds more contrast to the JPEG than the black and white. I'm sure that's by design, because to me, that seems like a very nicely contrasted picture. You can even dial down the vibrance if you don't want quite as much in there. This was early morning. They were working on the streets a few blocks over from here. I'm going to show you an example of how you can recover the shadows in this. This had the exposure and the shadows pumped up quite a bit, and you're not seeing a lot of noise in that shadow area either, even after virtually 100% increase in the shadows. That's the original. And there's the edit. You can really see straight out of camera version, the warmth isn't as pronounced, but if you lighten that up, you see it gets a lot of a red tone in there, much more of a reddish tone. And of course, you can just take that down with the temperature, or you can sit black and white to give a more untoned version. I actually really like that picture when I get to looking at it. Moving on here, another example of some minimalistic black and white that's straight out of camera. Bring up the exposure a little bit, highlights, and maybe some contrast there, and then cool that down just a tad. Yeah, it's very impressive, really, when you think about the camera you're using here. Essentially, that little toy, quote-unquote, gimmicky camera. It's not too bad. Now, this is not too good of an example of it, but I'm going to show you another one. The lens on this, again, it's a TLR camera replica. It's not a true TLR. There's only one lens, that is the take and the view lens. Another example of the color there. Nice little flower. But you can see that it does give you some lens flare. Very pleasing if you're into that kind of thing. Let me skip ahead here. I know I had one. This is a good example of your lens flare shooting right into the sun there. I have no idea. I'm sure that's some type of meniscus lens in there. I don't think it really has any elements, but I could be wrong. But that is not entirely unpleasing to the eye. And again, you can bring the shadows up there, get some grain action going, or at least some noise that sort of looks like grain. One more before we move on to what's probably my favorite photo I've taken with this, and the last example we're going to show here before we move on to the video example. This one here, taken just passing by a barbershop a few towns over from here. And I think that shows the true strength of this camera. You can literally, it's so small, it's smaller than a cell phone, fits in your pocket, fits in your purse, anything that you want to actually put it in. And it's something that's always on you, and you get to snap a quick picture. I was walking by, this is actually me here. I actually like my reflection being in there. And I really edited this picture, really processed it. It gives a super, I hate to use the term, a super retro type feel, I think. Very film-esque to me in that respect. Very grainy here. I think I even added grain to this. I glowed up some of the lights here to give some semi-halation effects. and film bloom effects, and I love that picture. Absolutely love it. And to be having that made with just a little Chuzhao camera, I think that's extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. So hope you got something out of these examples. I hope it's a good cross-section of what you can expect from this little camera. And so let's move on to the video. This is the long press of the shutter button video. I'm standing over the camera looking down through the viewfinder. You cannot switch from black and white to color or color to black and white while you are recording video, but you can film in color and black and white. One thing to mention, as you see here, the video itself is not in 1:1 format. I believe that is going to be 16:9. Leia, hush, baby. My sweet girl. Now you can get this little guy from a couple of places, folks, or a few places today. Really, it's got a little more popular than it was when I had it. You can get it directly, of course, from the Chuzhao website. They have now a red version of this. You can get the black, quote-unquote, leatherette, the imitation plastic leatherette, or red. I actually love how the red looks on there, so you have two colors to choose from. You can also get it from Amazon, which is where I got mine. To me, I find that to be the cheapest price overall. I think I got this on Amazon Prime Day for like 40 bucks. And I just checked, I don't like dating the videos with prices, but I just checked as of today, this is September 18th or 19th, 2025. It is going for about that same price. It's about $39. There's a $4 coupon from Amazon. And that so far that's been the cheapest price that I can find, and they have the red version there as well. A word of warning, folks, a caveat of sorts. I have heard there are some knockoffs of this. I suppose maybe a knockoff of a knockoff, if you want to look at it that way. So I will post the link down in the description from the place where I got this one from Amazon, so you know for sure that it's going to be a legit Chuzhao camera. Just to reiterate, folks, who would want something like this? I am, quote unquote, a professional photographer, have been for probably close to 20 years now. I have some very great cameras, some very expensive cameras over the years. I've worked with a lot of the big name companies, Tamron, Sigma, Hasselblad. I'm sure there's some more out there. And I tell you that because I love it. You can be unpretentious. You can love a thing for what it is, even though it may not be technically on par. Sorry, guys. UPS, man. What was I saying? But yeah, you can love a thing for what it is. It doesn't have to be incredibly technically astute. It's just a nice little thing to go and take pictures. And if you love taking pictures, for me, that's more than enough. And you may want to know, I'm planning on making some modifications to this, some hacks to this little camera, personalizations, as you will. And we'll see how that goes. I'll probably do a little video on that too. Little Chuzhao TLR digital camera, folks. If you get this, it's a fun little camera. I don't think you're going to be disappointed in it if you have manageable expectations. And if you have this little guy already, let me know down in the comments what you think about it. If you've happened to use the little miniature Rolly that Rolleiflex put out some years ago, and you've used this one as well, I would be incredibly curious to know what you think about the differences between the two. As always, folks, if you got anything out of this, if you enjoyed the episode, a like costs nothing, a share costs nothing. Feel free to leave me a comment. It really goes a long way to helping the channel out because the channel is me. Thank you to all my subscribers. Thank you especially to my monthly paying subscribers. I'm going to give you a shout out here in the credits. As always, folks, can't end these videos.